بن مالك رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاث من كن فيه وجد حلاوة الإيمان أن يكون الله ورسوله أحب إليه مما سواهما وأن يحب المرء لا يحبه إلا لله وأن يكره أن يعود في الكفر كما يكره أن يقذف في النار أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. My brothers and sisters, last week I shared this hadith with you, in which the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم teaches us, guides us towards 3 steps, 3 points of action. If a person carries out, he or she will be able to taste the sweetness of one's faith. Now, without tasting faith, Iman and faith in and of itself is a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, it is the greatest blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Iman and faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not limited to, not restricted to an expression of faith. It is not restricted to the acknowledgement of faith. Iman doesn't mean just to say that you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the true essence of Iman, it extends beyond an expression, beyond a lip service or an acknowledgement. The fact of the matter is that the roots of our Iman are watered with our good deeds. Our actions, good actions, a'malu salihah, they are the things that strengthen and fortify our Iman. This is why everywhere you look in the Quran, Iman is always paired with a'malu salihah. Man amana wa amila salihah. Innal ladhina amanu wa amilu salihah. So our deeds, our actions are what waters the roots of our Iman. It what deepens the roots of our Iman. And whatever we do, whatever action that we do to strengthen our Iman, what is the motivation behind any action? The motivation is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one does something without understanding that it is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't understand something being a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless a person loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the motivation behind every action is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unless and of course you're doing something for praise, or you're doing something for an applaud, so that someone can say, oh, mashallah, that person, that brother or that sister is so and did such and such thing. If that is the motivation, the incorrect motivation, then that does not water our Iman. Or if our purpose behind something or to do something good to someone is so that I can get something back in return. Or I'm going to treat you nicely, or I'm going to help you out in your time of need so I can gain leverage against you. These are incorrect motivations behind a'mal, and those a'mal are not a'malu salihah, even if they look like it from the outside. But not only will they not water our Iman, not only will they go unrewarded in the hereafter, but they will turn into a burden and sin for us. And we will be told on the Day of Judgment, go and seek the reward of these deeds for who you have done, who you were trying to please by them. So whatever we do, apart from being insincere or with a different motive, The motivation is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do it because we love Allah, because we love the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because we love his legacy. This is something that we acknowledge, we affirm. At least 5 times a day in the adhan, we constantly hear or say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. We affirm this, we acknowledge this. We love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no question whether we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not. Why are we here praying Jumu'ah? Many of us left our work, left our businesses, left our classes, left our many other obligations behind to be here at this time, in this place, for what? Because we don't care? No. It is because we care. Because we have respect and reverence for the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now obviously that level of love, it reflects differently. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. When the call is made, hasten towards the remembrance of Allah. Stop, drop, and roll out to the masjid. Some people make it a point to be here before the adhan, before the angels wrap up their record. Some people make it a point to come early and be able to sit in the first saf. And by the way, this is why I pass out the itr, okay? It's not because, I'm friends with everybody, inshallah, but not because I love these brothers more than I love everyone else. I'm trying to motivate people to consider this prime real estate, the first saf. I have enough itr to go around, but it is to be a motivation. But for some people who don't have a valid excuse, or who don't come across any unnormal incident on the road or on the highway, for some people it is a chronic illness of being late for Salatul Jumu'ah, where people are trickling right when the Iqamah is going on. Indeed, they have love for Jumu'ah, but if there's no valid excuse, not as much love as than those who are here earlier for Salatul Jumu'ah. And I'm sure it's fair to say that. So the question is not whether we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or we love the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The question is our love enough? The question is that if we come to the crossroads between obeying the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and between following our desires, is our love enough that it will tip the scale towards fulfilling the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The question is, if we find ourselves at a crossroads between following the sunnah and on the other hand following with some innovation or with some deviant mentality or outright rejection for the sunnah, that type of path, is our love for the sunnah and legacy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam enough to tilt us towards the sunnah? Is the love of the sunnah enough for us to steer away from bid'at, to steer away from innovations? Is the love of Allah enough that it will keep us away from haram, regardless of what situation and scenario that we may find ourselves in? Let's take one scenario: earning money. A person is at the crossroads of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and or getting into haram. It is very easy to make quick money, to make haram money. You have a business, you have a store, get a license, get video poker, start selling liquor. Quick money, easy money. Earning a halal living, majority of the time, is a struggle. But haram, حُجِبَتِ النَّارُ بِالشَّهَوَاتِ وَحُجِبَتِ الْجَنَّةُ بِالْمَكَارِهِ. Earning haram is easy. Earning halal there's a struggle to it. So what happens when a person comes at this crossroads? Okay, a person finds themselves, إِنَّمَا الْخَمْرُ وَالْمَيْسِرُ وَالْأَنصَابُ وَالْأَزْلَامُ رِجْسٌ مِّنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ. Stay away from that. So at one side you have this hukum of Allah, and at the other side you have, oh, you know what? Let me become rich. Let me make a quick buck. Let me become successful in this world. If a person's love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not enough, they will tilt in the wrong direction. And not only that, but they will make excuses and they will come up with their own explanation. Oh, but we don't drink, but we don't consume. Subhanallah. So the question is whether we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough to do the right thing. Whether we love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's sunnah and legacy enough to do the right thing. It's not a question where we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not. And we come through many crossroads in our life. Whether it's a financial decision, whether it's a marital decision, a domestic decision. Whatever decision we make, if we put Allah first and the sunnah first, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow us to enjoy and savor our iman. But we have to give it a chance. We have to give it a shot. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Whoever strives fina, within us, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will guide them towards not just one alternative. Subulana, many paths Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide one towards. Just like the kunafa last week. Once you get a taste, then you'll want more. Until then, you won't really care for it. And by the way, I didn't have lines of packages of kunafa last week since the khutbah, okay? So yeah, I wasn't trying to throw something out there. So, don't get it wrong. Now, going back to the hadith. وَأَن يُحِبَّ الْمَرْءَ لَا يُحِبُّهُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. To love one another unconditionally. To feel for one another unconditionally. To learn to help others unconditionally for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To defend the honor and respect of our fellow Muslim brother and sister only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't have someone's back only because, you know what, they're my people. This is my people. He's from my village. He's from my country. He speaks my language. Don't only extend your courtesy and compassion to those who are from your background or for people that you know. The Prophet ﷺ has told us to spread salam. عَلَى مَنْ عَرَفْتَ وَمَنْ لَمْ تَعْرِفْ. On those you know and you don't know. Spread salam, spread love, spread smiles. Love everyone for the sake of Allah, for the sake of their iman, for the sake of their Islam, regardless of how long they have been Muslim. We talk about the rhetoric and all of the hatred and bigotry that's going on by politicians and by presidential candidates and everything that they're talking about Islam, and it really gets us worked up when we hear about this, right? What about the racism that exists within our own Muslim community? Not just here, but in every community. Some more, some less. Some more than others. Where we have people that are split into groups based on nationality, based on language, based on mentality, ideology, school of thought or school of not. One group looking down at the other group. All these associations and affiliations that we have, rather than getting together under one banner that we are Muslim and loving one another for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we may not feel this because maybe we're accustomed to this. Maybe we grew up in the midst of this. But for our new Muslim brothers and sisters who we welcome into our community, they feel it. They see it. They hear it. It hits them very hard. Ask them what they go through. Not only do they have the struggle with their families when their families oust them and outcast them and cut ties with them, but ask someone who is new to our community how they feel in Ramadan. How they feel on Eid, how they feel on Christmas and Thanksgiving, days that were the epicenter of their social life, of their family life. Now that option is not available because they decided to sacrifice that to accept the message of Iman, to accept the message of Islam. So not only are they isolated from their own families, but many a times they are isolated by the new family that they have come to embrace, the Muslims. Ask ourselves how it feels whenever we find ourselves isolated in a situation. We find ourselves somewhere where we don't know anybody, we have no contacts, we come in between a rock and a hard spot and someone helps us out. How good that makes us feel. Imagine the feeling that someone new to our community, a convert, revert, whatever you want to say, how fulfilling it is for them when someone just randomly extends a common courtesy to them. How awesome that feels. Which leads me to the third point that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, وَأَنْ يَكْرَهَ أَنْ يَعُودَ فِي الْكُفْرِ كَمَا يَكْرَهُ أَنْ يُقْذَفَ فِي النَّارِ. The third step that leads one to taste the sweetness of Iman is when one develops the hatred and dislike and distaste for disbelief. When one hates going back to the disbelief that one may be in, just as strong as they hate being thrown into fire. كَمَا يَكْرَهُ أَنْ يُقْذَفَ فِي النَّارِ. Let's understand this for a second. Who likes to burn themselves every now and then? Okay, imagine we're getting up, going for work. We see our wife making kunafa. Here you go, I'm slipping it in again. All right, we might say to ourselves, ooh, you have kunafa coming out of the oven? Let me taste that. Let me get a little taste before I go. Start my day off right. Maybe that would happen. But who in their right mind, if they're leaving for work, oh, you're cooking? Oh, let me stick my hand on the stove. Let me get a little burn. No one likes to feel the burn unless you're at a Bernie Sanders rally or at the gym. No one likes to feel the burn. No one likes to be thrown into fire. That's common sense. There's a saying by Muhammad Ali. And you might be like, who's Muhammad Ali? Muhammad Ali. Okay? Not everyone knows who I'm talking about. Muhammad Ali. Okay? He says that I don't smoke, but I keep a box of matches in my pocket. And whenever my heart slips towards sin, I burn a match and I bring it close to my palm and I say that if you can't even bear this heat, how can you bear the unbearable heat of the fire of hell? Brothers and sisters, when someone accepts Islam, when they leave kufr behind them, when they get so firm in their belief that they can never fathom going back to their previous life, the previous kufr, the life of sins, when they develop this type of mentality that they would hate going back to their previous life just as they would hate themselves inflicting pain on themselves, then that person is someone who will taste the sweetness of Iman. But now imagine someone who accepts Islam. Not only are they going through all the struggles and sacrifices of being cut off from their family, but imagine how confusing it becomes for them when they see Muslims doing the same things that they learned to leave behind in a previous life. Imagine how confusing it gets when someone who probably, not necessarily, drank, consumed alcohol, and now after accepting Islam and leaving the bottle behind them, they see a Muslim drink. But Muslims drink, but Muslims do drugs, but Muslims date, but Muslims sell beer, and a lot of it, a whole lot of it. Imagine how confusing it gets for them. And they say, oh, Muslims do whatever they want, which is an oxymoron, because Muslim means someone who doesn't do whatever they want. Oh, Muslims do whatever they want. The point that I'm trying to make is that, look, the way to reach the level of tasting your Iman, especially for a new Muslim, okay, is that when you love your Iman so much that you hate going back as much as you hate being thrown into a fire, where a person wishes they would have gotten a head start. Now, the ones who have been Muslims for a while, or who were born into Islam, when those Muslims choose not to taste the sweetness of Iman, when Muslims choose not to put Allah first, when Muslims choose not to put the Sunnah first, when Muslims choose not to put our differences aside, you know who it has an effect on? It has an effect on those people who are trying to hate their previous life. Those people who have been there, done that, and now they are Muslim. When they see these type of things from Muslims, it makes it hard. It doesn't make it easier for them to hate their previous life even more when they see Muslims doing exactly what they used to do before. So brothers and sisters, let's wake up and smell the kunafa. Let's wake up and realize and take our religion seriously. Let us take our deen seriously. Let us develop the love for Allah. Let us take the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ seriously. Let us all get together and grab the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Together. All for one and one for all. We are in the month of Rajab, which means that the month of Ramadan is drawing closer. The month of Rajab is a month to cultivate. It is a month to get the grounds prepared and ready in order to reap and harvest during the month of Ramadan. The month of Rajab and following Sha'ban are months to get ourselves mentally, spiritually, and physically prepared to taste the sweetness of Iman. In Ramadan, we all intend to make U-turns. We all intend to make changes, to start new beginnings. We all intend to make U-turns. But brothers and sisters, those of us who drive, you know that in order to make a U-turn, first you need to slow down. You can't make a U-turn if you're driving very fast away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need to slow down. You need to get yourself prepared in order to make that U-turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The month of Ramadan, if we start preparing now, then in the month of Ramadan, when that comes around, we will be able to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to take the little steps from now in loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The little steps of putting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sunnah first. To practice loving our brothers and sisters for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why today, this afternoon, as soon as the prayer is over, I'm going to ask everyone to stand up and hug your brother towards the right and hug your brother towards the left. And sisters, do that upstairs. I don't want any brothers hugging any sisters or vice versa outside. Leave it in here. Before we leave, make this azam that from now on we will get closer to Allah. We will develop a love for the sunnah, and we will develop a love for one another that is based solely and strictly on La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Start identifying those people who are new in our community and make them feel welcome. And the shaitan that comes in between us, make him feel unwelcome. Break his back. Let him know and let him feel that he is not welcome at our dinner table. That shaitan is not welcome at my business, at my workplace. Shaitan is not welcome at my dinner table. But guess what? This change starts with me and me and me and me. This change starts with the man in the mirror. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.